Okay, so this is out of number 7 cylinder on a Ford 3-9 cubic inch engine from 1964. What I'm looking at is how white that central porcelain is, and the negative electrode has more of the tan kind of color I'd rather see on the porcelain. This tells me that they're running very, very lean on the air-fuel mixture. Okay, what Leah has done is she put in that spark plug finger tight and ran it down until the seat hit the head. Now she's going to tighten it. And like Kenny says in Wrenching with Kenny, you don't have to go bananas. Just get it tight. It's tight enough. Otherwise, you might be the next one trying to take out that cylinder head when it's stuck.
This one's brown.
This is a more expected coloration, and you can see there's a white side and a dark side. The dark side is where the fuel is not quite burning completely, but it's not pure white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking at the heat range on these plugs. This is an Autolit 45, heat range 45.
Oh.
Okay, so she's going to check the gap now, and they're either 34 or 35 thousandths of an inch. So we're doing a 35 thousandth inch gauge, and what we want it to drag slightly. Otherwise, the gap is a little too large, and it doesn't take too much of an excess gap to cause a misfire. Notice that she's using those little wedge slots at the end to open and close that gap by bending the outside of the electrode. We're not tapping it on a bench or on concrete. Okay, that's a tight 35, so it's probably real close to 34. We'll be fine there.
Okay.
And then we're going to put that one back in, and she's going to hand thread it until it goes to the bottom, and then she'll finish it with the ratchet. I mean,
sure.
The thing is so bright white.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if it wasn't a higher heat range. The other thing that can cause that kind of whiteness on the porcelain for a spark plug is a lean mixture because of a vacuum leak. And so I don't sense any vacuum leaks with the way the car runs, but I haven't driven it, and I haven't checked for any vacuum leaks yet. So if we don't find any other reason for it, that would be an indication we have a vacuum leak. It's typically, if the problem is the carburetor, all of the plugs with the same heat range will all look real bright white, but I haven't seen that on all of the plugs.
I'm going to pull 3 back out.
Okay, so here we go again. She's getting more practice taking this one out. She can start thinking of lucky stores. This is not a 390 or 428 engine, because there's no way she'll be able to reach the plugs that easily. Even a 351 Windsor or Cleveland would be tough. We'll have to start your own YouTube, Wrenching with Leah.
All right, here's, and that says, it looks like a 45 also.
Okay, same heat range, but it's burning very, very lean. And I can tell that because the center electrode ceramic is so bright white as opposed to the one we just saw. So we might end up finding that we have a vacuum leak on the intake manifold, which on these 260, 289, 302, 351, Cleveland or Windsor tends to happen more often than not. The good news is this engine has very little hanging on it, so to get the intake manifold off won't be all that difficult. Also, it's aluminum high-rise, so aluminum is a lot less heavy as compared to the stock cast iron intake manifold. Okay, so now we have had all four off on this side?
On this side, yeah.
Okay. I had taken Leah had taken number one out earlier, and that was before I started taking photos of how they look. I'm leaning more and more to intake manifold gasket leak. Okay, we're going to go on the other side of this vehicle and check their gaps and read the plugs. I had mentioned earlier in this video wrenching with Kenny. I see a lot of really good YouTube channels, and one of my favorite is Wrenching with Kenny. This guy is definitely old school. He's been at this at least as long as I have, or about as long, and he has some old school and some modern world perspectives and experience that is invaluable. So if you want to really find a great channel, I would say Wrenching with Kenny, Kenny. You won't be disappointed.
The Band-Aid.
Whoa.
Did you get it? I might. It's not terrible.
That is bright white, so that is also running lean, and that gap looks a little bit large. We'll find out in a moment. Leah will see. Yep. And then these older engines, it doesn't take much of a gap that's too large to cause a misfire. So we really want to be as close to 0.35 or 0.34 of an inch as possible. 0.32, you won't get enough of a spark to properly ignite the combustible air-fuel mixture. Too large a gap, and these ignition coils just don't have the oomph necessary to light off a big enough, hot enough spark to jump a gap that big consistently, especially at higher RPMs and under heavy load. So we've had a few already that were 0.40 gap instead of 0.35, 0.34. I'm hoping all this going on is causing a misfire. Otherwise, we'll hook it up to the old school sun oscilloscope and look for anything that is causing a misfire. Now, someone might be thinking, check the ignition points. Okay, that's fair, but we have already had installed in this vehicle a Pertronix ignition system, and I verified with the key in run position, we're getting full battery voltage. Switched battery voltage to the ignition coil is not being fed through the stock resistor wire with 6, 7, 8, or 9 volts to it. We had just about 12 volts. So we don't have a point bounce issue, and we don't have too large or small a gap for the points, although the air gap might not be correct. So I think what I'll do is once we're done with the spark plugs, I'm going to go ahead and use a brass feeler gauge, non-magnetic, to check the air gap to make sure that it is where it's supposed to be for the Pertronix pickup coil and reluctor. Aaliyah had a little battle damage. She's not gushing blood, but
Busted knuckles.
Yeah, she is earning her stripes.
Right there, yeah, perfect.
Now the reality is that, okay, so she's covered a little bit of a bleed, but more important, she's actually put cushioning on for the next time she hits it. So I was thinking of Leah should probably start her own YouTube channel. And I've got the name for it. Busting Knuckles with Aaliyah.
Dad used to have a shirt, and it was a hot rod shirt, and it said Busted Knuckles, something Busted Knuckles. Might have been a newsletter or something.
Well, there you go. Aaliyah comes from many years of working on cars that her father owned, on high-performance snowmobiles. She races snowmobiles, and I think the only thing she enjoys more than working on her own cars, like here, is sharing that experience with the likes of me, where I kind of have a really good idea of how to do it, but physically I have some constraints now. I can't do things I used to do.
This is how I... Uh-oh.
I can help you with the breaker bar.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. See now, and that is why, boys and girls, when we put these spark plugs back in, we don't go bananas. Like Kenny says, don't go bananas. Tight enough is tight enough, snug. You don't want them too loose. And it's really not practical to use a torque wrench on these things. A lot of the times, we probably could on here, but snug enough is snug enough. If they loosen up, we'll hear it.
Wait.
Okay, here comes, is that number 2 or 3? Or, I'm sorry, 5, 6, 7, or 8. Let's see that bad boy. And that is almost pure white also. And that heat range is also 45?
Yep.
Yep, sure is. Okay, let's go ahead and cap that. That was in good shape?
Yeah, it needed just a tiny tweak.
Okay. You know, it's very possible when these plugs were put in, someone might have put them in straight from the box, because the manufacturers will try to get them close to 0.035 inch gap. They don't guarantee it unless you get a set of racing spark plugs, and that can be different. But these, they figure close enough is close enough, and they always will say to gap the plugs, even if they're brand new, before installing them. And I cannot even begin to tell you how many times over the years, when I get a brand new set of Champion or Autolite plugs, the gap would be too large, and I would have to narrow the gap down to 0.35 or a tight 0.35, which is close to 0.34. Well, so far, we've only seen 2 spark plugs, only one of which I have on video, that weren't pure white. And the number 1 plug that was not pure white had enough whiteness on it to cause me concerns. So I'm thinking that we might have an overall lean condition with the carburetor itself. Now, why we have 2 plugs that are a little more tannish discolored, normal, I don't know. It is possible we have more than one intake manifold runner that has a vacuum leak. But there's ways of checking for vacuum leaks, and I have a special tool called a smoke tool, where we put mineral oil inside a chamber, let it heat up, and it starts to send vaporized mineral oil out. And we stuff that down inside the venturi of the carburetor and open that venturi up and look for smoke to come out from any areas where the intake manifolds or the carburetor contact other surfaces with the gasket. So that's one way of checking. Another way is for the engine to be running, spray some carburetor cleaner down near where the intake manifold bolts to the head and see if the engine speed changes. The only problem with that is if we spray too much, you get overspray down the carburetor, and that'll give you a false sense of having a lean condition because of a manifold leak. But we'll see.
The white one, Gil.
Another white one?
The white one, another 45.
Yeah, this thing is running way lean. That's also 45, yep. And the gap is
A little bit too big. Just a tiny bit big.
okay. Close enough. And I had checked the ignition timing the other month because the vacuum advanced diaphragm, which is dead center on this frame, was leaking. It was ruptured, so I replaced it. And anytime you replace a vacuum advanced diaphragm, you've got to double check the initial timing. Now, on these older 260, 289, 302 engines, typically the factory spec was 6 degrees before top dead center, although the high performance versions could be 8 to 10 degrees before top dead center. Even more if we had really good gasoline, but the only non-alcohol, non-ethanol gasoline we have out here is like 89 octane, which is better than 87 octane, but it's a shame. But I guess the point is that if running 87, 88, or 89 octane, that ignition timing was too far advanced, the engine would be pinging, especially under load. And it would take a lot of excessive spark advance to start to affect the coloration on the white porcelain inside the spark plug. So I really am leaning more towards a lean condition. What I don't know on this Holley carburetor is what size jets we have currently. So I'm going to take a picture of the air horn where the stamp is. And look up and see what jets they came with. Order some jets that are sized up 1, 2, or 3 steps from what we have currently. And when they show up, we'll go ahead and we'll change those jets out, unless later today we find that we do have a vacuum leak on the intake manifold, which I'm leaning more and more toward all the time. I guess one thing we can do is, once the spark plugs are in, is check the torque on the intake manifold mounting bolts and make sure that they're torqued down correctly. If they are loose or not torqued correctly, that could be the whole problem, causing a vacuum leak. Just tightening it down may or may not fix it, because if they are loose and sucking air, you probably have some dirt between the mating surfaces and the gasket. Oh, wow. This one looks actually pretty darn good.
So 5. So 1 and 5 are the most forward in the engine, and those are both brown.
Yeah. Yeah, this actually looks almost perfect. So, yeah, we'll check and see how tight the intake manifold bolts are, and then go from there. If they're loose, then we'll tighten them down to spec and take it out for a run and see if we still have a misfire. I don't know where my smoke machine is. I just know I have it here and I have never used it before. So if we can find that, we can test with that, or see if I have any carburetor spray around here, carburetor cleaner.
I think I might.
Aaliyah might have some, and we use that to test for a vacuum leak. But if we don't have a vacuum leak that's being indicated, then yeah, changing the jetting on the forward or primary metering block for this Holley carburetor is where I would go next. The only thing that causes me to hesitate is that number 1 and 5 spark plugs really look pretty good. And I think it was number 3 looked pretty good also. So 3 of the 5 spark plugs look decent. Well, 2 for sure. The third one is a little bit white, but has some tan on the other side. So, yeah, that might still be a little bit lean. And having lean cylinders and plugs like that doesn't just happen arbitrarily. Something causes that. Okay, so I'm glad Aaliyah is not wrenching these things in super tight. My father did that once. He retired, and I made the mistake of buying him a set of tools and a manual on how to work on his own car. So he decided he needed new spark plugs, which he didn't. Well, when he got done, he announced to my mother and my younger sister very proudly, "I just tuned up the engine, it runs good." Well, the way he said it runs good, my younger sister got very suspicious. So she said, "Do you mind if I take it out and get some things at the grocery store? I'd like to drive it." And he proudly handed her the keys. She started the thing up, and she heard sound coming from under the hood. So she drove to the local Ford dealership, and service advisor, she told him that, "Hey, my father just tried tuning these up and it doesn't sound right." Lifted the hood, started the engine. He started to laugh. He says, "Your father put in that spark plug cross-threaded." And he says, "We'll be able to fix that real quick." So wrote the thing up. The technician came out, read the ticket, snickered. My sister was watching him. She wanted to talk to him about what was going on, give him an idea of why this happened, and no, it wasn't her. And he said, "Yeah, this happens once in a while. People cross-thread these things, but they don't get down but maybe half a turn or more before they stop." And so he tried taking that spark plug out, and he had to get a breaker bar. He said he's never seen anybody tie the one all the way down and seat it. And my sister says that's because my father is strong as a bear. He used to be an Army Ranger before he retired. And he's a physician specializing in physical medicine that takes a lot of strength. So luckily they were able to chase the threads and get them cleaned up without taking the head off. But that technician wasn't snickering anymore after he saw that my father buried that spark plug all the way down to the seat, cross-threaded. I learned my lesson. Never put tools on my father's hands. We never did it again. And I hid that toolbox from him. And in time, he forgot all about it and went into other things, almost as destructive. Okay, it looks like the spark plug wire is being put back on, so I'm going to kill this video until we get ready to check the intake manifold bolt torque. Okay, I have a gear head ratcheting torque wrench. I found that the intake manifold bolt torque specs for a Ford 289 is 23 to 25 foot-pound. So I went ahead and set this for 25 foot-pounds. And now I'm going to see if I can find the correct size socket and any necessary extensions, and we will check that set of intake manifold bolts to make sure they're tight.